welcome to another Triple T Thursday. For those just joining us, that's tools, tips, and talk, where we'll discuss info for the knife maker. In today's episode, we're going to finish the beginner knife that we've been working on. Today we're going to add a handle, we're going to do all of the finish work, and we're going to sharpen it. Stay tuned to the end, guys. You'll find out how you can win this knife.
We're picking up from last time. Last time we completely hand sanded the knife, taped it up. Now we're ready to put the handle on. So for handle material, I've decided I'm going to use this Tiger Maple, which is a really great material. This one's been stabilized, so should look really nice. You can kind of see the rippling of the wood there. It looks really cool. And I've decided we're going to use blue G10 liners. So I have these two rough cut on the table saw. Now we're just going to take them to the 2x72 or whatever grinder you got just to smooth them out. A disc grinder would be ideal for this.
This is where I find the portabands kind of annoying because you only have about a 4-inch depth of cut. So here you can see I'm flipping it around and having a cut from the other side.
Okay, so we're ready to glue these up. The first thing I always do is score these. And that's just to put some marks in these so that the glue has somewhere to go into, the epoxy. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, we're ready to start gluing up. So I've got my epoxy. I'm using 5-minute epoxy. It's usually what I always use for this kind of things. It's always worked fine. Either a Dixie cup or a plastic cup. I use a popsicle stick for a stir stick. And I've got my clamps ready. So we will mix this epoxy. Just follow the instructions on the epoxy that you're using. You don't need much here because we're not using a whole lot here. Make sure you mix the epoxy thoroughly. A lot of people report bad experiences with some epoxies. I would say normally it is user error and they did not mix the epoxy good enough. And I always butter each side, both what you're applying to it and the piece that you're sticking it to. So this, it's good to wear gloves with this, but I didn't put any on this time. So I'm just going to sit that there for now while I do the other one. Okay, you may be tempted to just leave it like that. Okay, don't do it. The heat from the epoxy will actually sometimes make these rise and separate. You have to clamp these down. So what we're going to do is I like to just put them on a piece of, this is kind of wax paper that comes off the backing for the sandpaper that I use. I'm going to wipe this piece of, I got some epoxy on the corner here, just so that it lays flat when I put it on the knife. I like these can't twist clamps. They are awesome. And then just clamp it down in the center. Not too tight. Because if you do it too tight, you'll squeeze all the epoxy out of it. There we go. And even though this is 5-minute epoxy, it doesn't mean this is ready in 5 minutes. 5 minutes is the working time. The set time for these is still at least an hour. And I still usually leave it overnight. All right, we'll come back tomorrow and we will check on our scales and then we'll size them to the knife. Okay, it's the next day. We have our liners all glued up. They look really nice and tight, no gaps all around. So now it's time to put the pinholes in our scales. So to do this, what we're going to do is take the scales just like we would glue them on the knife. So put them like that, put the knife on top, and then we're going to take a wood backer and put it underneath. And the reason you're going to use a wood backer is when you drill through, if it's just wood here, sometimes the drill bit will blow out here. But if you have another piece of wood pressed against it, it'll just drill through the bottom and it won't blow out your piece of wood. So that's an important piece. So what I'm going to do is just use these can't twist clamps again, just so I know the blade is not going to move. Okay, so that's my pinhole and that's my pinhole. Okay, and I make sure I've got enough room around it. So what I'm going to do now is take a marker and I'm going to draw around the blade, because we're going to want to trim off the excess, so you need to know where that is. So I use a thick marker and then I just go up to my line here. Sometimes those are in the way. The other thing I do is I mark out where the front of this is going to be. Okay, so I want this to go up to about here. Okay, there, and then I want the other one to go to about here. And then I'll draw a little arc on there after I remove them. Okay, let's go to the drill press and we'll show you how to drill the pinholes. So I've got this sitting on the drill press on the table. I've got this sitting on two 1-2-3 blocks, and that allows your clamps some relief here. And then you're just going to drill your holes. First, a little bit about pinholes and sizes. For most of my hunting knives, I will go with 3/16. I just find 1/4 inch is a little too big. The pins are just kind of in your face. I do use 1/8 pins sometimes, but usually there's a reason. For hunting knives, I usually stick to 3/16. Do whatever you want. We're going to start by drilling this end pinhole. I'm going to be securely holding the knife here, and I'm just going to drill through my existing hole. So there we have our pinholes on both sides. Let's talk about pin material. So there's lots of different things you can use for pins. This is classic mild steel. It's actually what I'm going to use for this build, but there's also things you can use. This is stainless steel. This is a mosaic pin, if you can see that. Just puts a nice little, you can see it better on that side, puts a nice little effect on the blade. Can be a little more complicated because these are actually filled with epoxy. So you got to be careful not to melt out the epoxy as you're heating them up. And also what's becoming more popular are these G10 pins. For this blade, since it's kind of a silver blade, we're just going to go with straight, steel looking pins. So we're going to use mild steel. So I'm just going to rough measure these. Okay, so about that much. Remember to count for the width of your blade. Okay, and we can go too long. Obviously, you don't want to go too short, but you can go longer. So I want about that long, and then I'm just going to cut them on the angle grinder. So now you see that these have some rough edges on them. So I'm going to show you a good trick to fix that. So I'm going to actually put each of these in the drill. Whoa. There. Tighten this up. And I'm going to take this to the 2x72 or whatever grinder you have, spin it reverse from the grinder, and I'm just going to kind of dome the edges of both ends. So let's go do that. So here we have our pins all domed. Let's always do a test fit before you do glue up. So these fit perfectly, a little bit snug, but they go in and I don't have to force them. If they are a little tight, which is very common, what you should do is just put them in your drill, spin them in the drill, and just take a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and just hold it against them, and that'll thin them out a little bit, and then you'll be able to do it. Also remember, make sure that they fit in these holes with here. So do a full, because sometimes what can happen, even if you just test fit the two of them, sometimes you can actually drill your holes, I'm going to do this sideways, that are actually kind of cambered a little bit like this. So individually they will go in fine. You need to test them in the actual blade construction and make sure that they are straight and go in appropriately. See, this is tricky because it's hard to see where the blade is. There. Okay, so these go in just fine. Always make sure your pins fit dry before you get to glue up. You don't want to be racing around when you have glue 5-minute epoxy setting. Okay? All right, so next thing we're going to do is put the pins in. Okay, we're going to decide what we want the front of our scales to look like. So I'm going to kind of do something just like this. Okay, from here, and just arc it a little bit. Like that. Now we're going to go cut these out on the bandsaw. Leave the pins in so you know where you're cutting.
Now it's time to work on the front of the scales. This is the area that's going to be against the knife near the ricasso. You're not going to be able to sand this later. That's why we're going through all this effort now. I started by putting some reference lines in because I like to grind 45-degree bevels at the front of my scales.
Now I've got these all the same. Now it's just a matter of sanding them. Another reason why I like this adhesive back, I could just stick it to my finger and sand this all smooth. So we're going to take this from 220 all the way up to 800. This is also your first chance to see what your handle is going to look like. Okay, we're ready for glue up. I like to have everything laid out before I start to make sure I'm not reaching for things or I'm not looking for things. Also, do a mental check before you do glue up. A lot of people, including myself at first, rush to glue up because, you know, that's an exciting part, and then forgot to do a step. So make sure you mentally go through your head, have you done everything that you need to do? Incidentally, something that I just learned, this is acetone. Don't pour acetone in these plastic cups because it melts out the bottom. It just went all over my table. I'm used to using the Dixie cups and I didn't even think of it. So don't pour acetone in these. So I've got acetone ready. I've got my Q-tips, my clamps, my pins, everything all set. So let's do our glue up. You want a little more glue, a little more epoxy here because it's going to go flow in the holes. So that's why I went back and poured some more. Okay, now we're going to do our pin. So make sure you kind of butter the pin first. And now the bottom side of the blade. And don't worry about getting excess on here. That's why we have the acetone and the Q-tips. Get it all in the holes. That's our connection. Besides the pins, that is our main connection point, is all of the epoxy that's in the holes. You got to be careful with these can't twist clamps because they're very powerful. get it tight, but don't crank down on it. So we're all glued up. Next thing we're going to do is grind down the pins. And then we're going to square up the block. Obviously it's super thick right now, so we got to take this down by about a half. Maybe something I should have considered before gluing it all up, but it is what it is. So we'll take that down on the grinder.
When you're grinding pins, make sure you use a fresh belt. You don't want to build up too much heat.
All right, we're ready to do one of the most important steps of doing your handle, and that's squaring it up. Always do this before you start shaping or doing other things with your handle. So it may look like, oh, these are even and that it's not narrower up here than it is here, but you don't know. So this is going to help us. We're going to take the blade, because we know the blade itself is even. And then I've just put a pencil here. You can actually do it without the pencil, but the pencil shows up easier. So I'm going to just mark this all the way around with pencil. Okay, and I'm going to do it so that I'm about just over 1/4 inch. Okay, now I'm going to flip it over. And now I know, since the 1, 2, 3 block is a constant height, okay, now I know what to grind to.
It probably would have been a good idea to cut these thinner with the table saw, but oh well. Remember that I'm simulating not having a horizontal grinder, so that's why I put the rest this way, and I'm showing you guys how to grind them this way. Again, if you have a spindle sander, that'll work too. Obviously the best is a small wheel attachment on a 2x72, but not everybody has that. Here I'm doing some finish grinding on the spine of the knife near where the clip point starts, because we never actually sanded that, so now we're doing it. Here I'm just using a compass to draw lines around the knife, and this is so that I can now grind to those lines and have bevels on the handle all around. I like my handles to flare a little bit towards the butt or the end of the knife, so what I'm doing now is tapering them towards the front. I'll start with these strips of 220 grit sandpaper, and I'll shoe shine the handle until I remove all of those bevels and it's nice and round. Once I've rounded off all the edges of the handle, I'll switch to using a backer so I can sand the pins and take all of the grind marks out of those pins.
We've got the handle sanded to 800. Now we're going to hit it on the buffer, and we'll do the blade at the same time.
I'm using some white compound here on the right wheel. The left wheel is clean with no compound, and it's just to do the final shine.
We're ready to sharpen this knife. So I like to tape the knife up completely when I'm sharpening, especially the blade. I do the handle as well because all these little fine particles sometimes are harder to clean off the knife, so I like to just tape it up. For this, I definitely like to tape up the blade so you don't get any scratches on it, because sometimes that can happen. And then what I like to do is just take a nice sharp blade here and just cut the tape along the blade like that. Okay, and then we're just going to sharpen that tape right off there, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to be using the Wicked Edge sharpening system. This is very similar to other sharpening systems like the Lansky or the TS Prof, and there's a bunch of these. I do think the Wicked Edge is one of the best. if not the best of this type of sharpener. It's also one of the most expensive ones. So take that for what it is. This is the Wicked Edge Go. So this is kind of their portable version, and it comes with a little C-clamp, clamps to your table. It comes with this part that you just put in here. There. It's very rigid, that's why I like it. You don't need to flip the knife over or anything like that. The knife will sit edge up. We're going to put these two bars on either side. There and here. Okay, you can see it has, well, hopefully you can see, it's got the degree markers on here, which is really nice. I'm going to set this one at about 22. That's what I want to sharpen this blade at. There. It comes with a little thing here. You can sit this in here. Then you can rest your blade on it. I like to put the blade so that this is about centered. Okay, so I want it about there. And then I will take this, tighten the top. And that will kind of pinch it. You can take that out. Then I'll give it kind of a half turn, quarter turn, maybe here. And then it's really the bottom one, which is going to squeeze this and then pinch this, which is really going to tighten it. You want this good and tight. There, not going anywhere. So the general technique here is that I'm going to be moving across the blade, but away from the blade. Whereas you'll grind this way, you want to sharpen the other way. Okay, and that's going to form a burr on the edge. And what a burr is basically a really, really thin flap of steel on the top. And as you sharpen one side, it's going to kind of push it over, and you sharpen the other side, it's going to push it over, and it's going to get thinner and thinner and thinner until it's like a couple molecules thick. And then at the end, we're going to strop it, and that's going to remove that burr. So the first step is really just to apex the knife, meaning, think of the top that it's basically flat right now. We're going to put a point at 22 degrees, and we're going to do one side, and then we're going to do the other. And we'll know when it's apexed, because after grinding one side, if you run your finger like this, you'll actually feel it kind of snag on the side, and that is the burr that you're feeling. So we're going to start pretty coarsely at an 80 grit stone, because this is a knife, obviously has never had a bevel on it before. So we're going to use a pretty coarse stone to do that. So I'm going to take you through it, and I'll show you. So I'm ready to go here. And I know I said when you're sharpening, you want to go away from the blade. The only exception is when you're doing the very first grit, because you really need to take this down, and that's going to take a while. So sometimes you'll just go up and down here. But in the very first starting out, just because I have the tape here, I'm going to make sure I'm on 80. I'm just removing the tape. You can see it's going to ball up a little bit here. All right, I think I've got most of the tape off. Now I'm going to start making that bevel. Okay, I can already feel that burr starting to form here. It's not quite, the steel's a bit thicker down here towards the ricasso, so I can't quite feel it here. So I'm going to work this area until I feel it. And it's a good idea to look on either side of the blade, and what we're checking for is the height of that bevel. Because if it starts to look radically higher on one side or another, it means you're spending too much time on one side. It should look the same on both sides, and that's a nice thing about having the tape. It's easy to see where your bevel's at. Yeah, I can definitely feel the burr here. But you can, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but you can kind of see just kind of a silver edge here. And I can feel it rough on my fingers. All right, let's go to the next one. So this one is a 200 and a 600 grit. So we're going to start on the orange, which is a 200, I believe. Yes. Now I'm going to be doing upward motions. And when I've done upwards in one direction, meaning I'm going to be coming this way, I'm going to switch it and go this way after a while. Because I want, imagine these are like grind lines. So if I keep doing this, my grind lines are coming this way. So what I want to do is make grind lines coming this way as well. Because what that's going to do is put kind of diamond patterns on the side. And it's just easier for those to come off in the next grit. If you keep going the same direction, you're just kind of digging little valleys. And if we put little diamonds, they just come off easier. And you'll get a nice finer edge and a cleaner edge as we get higher.
I go through the progression of about 5 different stones. It takes a while, usually about 15-20 minutes per blade.
Okay, it's pretty much sharp now, but there's a burr on the top, so now we need to remove that burr. Let's take the knife out. Okay, so this is where you want to try to maintain the same angle. What I like to do is put my fingers on the blade, and then I'm just going to run the blade across the strap. This is basically a piece of leather with green buffing compound on it. And I'm doing this very lightly. There's very, very little pressure. Okay, so now we're going to check how good we did on the blade. So I'm going to take the tape off, and we're going to do the obligatory paper test. And I'm going to be drawing it kind of slow across the blade because I want to see if it catches in any areas. Yeah, I don't feel anything. Yeah, that's pretty sharp. Oh, I think I just hit the choil there. Here we are, folks. There is the finished knife. It's been buffed. I've put a coat of wax on it, buffed it again. I love how you can see the kind of undulating colors of the tiger maple as it moves in the light. The blue liners really pop, and it's sharp. And the buffing really brought my my logo out, so I thought that was really cool. And let's talk about how you can win this knife.
So folks, if you want a chance to win this knife, all you got to do is join my Patreon. Let me tell you a bit about it. So not only do you get entries to drawings like the chance to win this knife, but there's a bunch of great other benefits. First off, of course, there's a community chat, the drawings that might be monthly, quarterly, I'm not sure yet, but there's definitely going to be some other drawings. You get access to all my designs. You get access to all my heat treat recipes. You get early access to purchase knives before they go open to the public. So that's a big one. So my knives for sale that you'll see in the build videos will be up for patrons first. So you will get first crack at buying those knives. And probably for most, the most important perk you're going to get for Patreon access is at the lowest level, you will get email consultation with me on builds. Okay, guys? So I'll help you out with builds. On the upper level, you'll get phone conversations and consultation with me on builds. So if you want access to me to help you guys out, this is how you do it. Also, it lets you support the channel and helps me keep doing what you guys already love. So thanks, guys. Consider joining the Patreon, get a chance to win that knife, and we'll see you on the next build, guys.